Among the 5 factors that should be endowed to the person who practices Satipatthana meditation, Saddha, faith and confidence, is the most important factor. And Sayadaw explained that having Saddha, faith and confidence on the things that are worthy of faith and confidence, having faith with knowledge, one has to cultivate the awakened Saddha through the practice. When one develops knowledge stage by stage, Saddha, faith and confidence will be increased, it will be cultivated, and the person becomes endowed with Saddha. By being endowed with Saddha, one gains 5 benefits. The Saddha alone, having Saddha alone on the Saddhaya Vatu, the objects that are worthy of faith and confidence, having Saddha alone without practice is not enough. Based on Saddha, faith and confidence, one should practice in order to develop knowledge stage by stage, so that the person's quality, the person's ability will be uplifted through the development of knowledge. And Buddha explained the other 4 factors that should be endowed by the person who practices so as to develop knowledge, and Sayadaw will explain each of these factors one by one. The second factor that the yogi should be endowed is good health. In order to cultivate the awakened Saddha through the practice, one should have physical strength. One should be able to digest the food that is taken. So the digestion should be good. But if the digestion exceeds the normal level, then the person can get hungry more often. And if the digestion is not enough, then the person suffers also from indigestion. If the digestion is excessive, then there can be problems, having illness concerning with bowel. And if the digestion is very weak, the person cannot digest food, that there can be digestive problem, having gastric stomach, and so on. So the digestion should be balanced. One should have balanced digestion in order to be able to practice. But nowadays, there are less people who are completely healthy. So if the person will only practice when he or she is completely healthy, then the person will not get to practice his or her whole life. So one should have good digestion in order to be able to practice. And Sayadaw explains that so long as the person can eat, so long as the person can sleep, it is taken that the person is healthy. So in this way, so long as the person can walk, so long as the person can eat, so long as the person can sleep, one has the conducive factors for practicing meditation, and the person is taken as a healthy person. When the person is endowed with the first two factors, it is quite satisfactory in order to practice. The third factor that the person should have is honesty. The person should have straightforwardness, honesty in the practice. One should not be pretending to have the virtue that one does not possess. And if there are weaknesses and wrongdoings, one should not hide one's weakness or wrongdoing in order to make others think good of him or her. If the person is pretending to have the virtue that he or she does not really possess, then the person is dishonest. And if the person is hiding his or her wrongdoings in order to pretend to be pure and clean, then it also shows that the person is dishonest. In this way, the person should not be dishonest in pretending or hiding, and one should reveal one's weaknesses if needs to be done, and one should not pretend to have virtue that one does not actually have. So in this way, the person should be straightforward and honest. This is the third factor. The person should not pretend to have the moral conduct, even though the person does not really possess the moral conduct. The person should not pretend to have pure physical, mental, physical and verbal behavior, even though he or she is not pure in the physical and verbal behavior. And the person should not pretend to have pure mind, although the person does not actually have. And the person should not pretend to have knowledge that he or she does not actually have. It may be so that the person has theoretical knowledge without practical knowledge. So one should not be pretending to have practical knowledge, although he or she has theoretical knowledge. In this way, one should not boast, or one should not show off or boast the virtues that one does not actually possess in order to show off, in order to make others think highly of him or her. And also, the person should not be boasting the very small percentage of his or her virtue. The person should not exaggerate his or her virtue to be great. In this way, one should not be satak, one should not be cunning, one should be free from cunningness. Amayavi, meaning one should reveal one's wrongdoing. One should not be hiding his or her wrongdoings. So if there are any kind of precepts that one has broken, then one should reveal it to the teacher openly, admitting his or her wrongdoing. During the Buddha's time, people confess and admit their wrongdoing to the Buddha. Or one should confess and one should admit their wrongdoing to Wenyu. Wenyu are the people who have wise knowledge, who seek for the benefit of others. And also one should reveal one's wrongdoing to fellow practitioners, especially bhikkhus. Monks should reveal their wrongdoings to other bhikkhus. Bhikkhunis also have to reveal their wrongdoings to other bhikkhuni, and samanera, samneri, they also have to reveal their wrongdoings to the fellows. In this way, one should confess the wrongdoings, and monks have to confess their offenses by saying desana, and also the samanera have to confess their wrongdoings to the teacher, and they have to take precepts and so on. In this way, if there are wrongdoings, one should not hide the wrongdoing, but one should reveal to the teacher or to the appropriate person. Because it is said that one should reveal one's wrongdoings in order to show one's honesty, but it is not necessary to confess one's wrongdoings on everyone. So one only needs to confess and admit their wrongdoings to the teachers and the fellows, so that the teacher and the fellows will be able to correct the person's mistake in a constructive manner. And not everyone can give a good suggestion, so one should not confess to everyone, but only to the teacher as well as the fellows. So in the text it is said that if there are wrongdoings or if there are any kind of offense that the person had done, one should admit to the teacher. One should confess to the teacher as well as the fellows. Usually in the world, people pretend to have virtues which they do not actually have. And they also hide their wrongdoings and mistakes. It is the nature of human beings that they exaggerate the virtues to others. People usually exaggerate their virtues and their good points to others in order to make others think highly of him or her. If there are weaknesses and mistakes, people usually belittle, or people usually think less of his or her mistake and wrongdoing. Just as they exaggerate on the good points they have, they hide the weaknesses and wrongdoing. So that shows that they are dishonest. As a person, as a human being, one should have power of prudence. One should know what is beneficial, what is not, what is suitable and what is not. One should have power of reasoning, power of prudence. And if there are wrongdoings, one should confess to oneself, and one should also confess to the teacher as well as the fellow yogis at appropriate time in order to have honesty. In the beginning of the practice, yogi does not have honesty yet, but when the yogi discerns knowledge into mind and matter, cause and effect, impermanent suffering and non-self, when the person discerns fast arising and passing away, then there will be ujjugata. The person will have honesty and straightforwardness. One will know very well one's own mistake, and one should not exaggerate one's good points, and one should not reduce or make less. One should not miscalculate one's mistake. At the stage of Uddiyapaya Jnana, at the stage of discerning fast arising and passing away, the virtue of honesty arises in great momentum. Honesty is very important, and it is important not to pretend. And if there is honesty, the person can live a good life. The person can live well throughout his or her life when the person is honest. And if the person is dishonest, his or her life will not be smooth. And Sayadaw explains by using an example how one person who was honest was fortunate to get a beautiful wife, where dishonest people lost the opportunity to be wedded to a beautiful wife. At one time in India, there was a professor who had a beautiful daughter. The professor wanted to hand in marriage of his daughter to a trustworthy student. So he wanted to choose a good son-in-law who was honest. So the professor talked to the students that he wanted to wed his daughter to the student, and he asked that the student bring some jewelry for the daughter without anyone knowing. Most of the students brought jewelry without any other person knowing, hoping to marry the beautiful daughter of the professor. But there was one particular student who did not bring anything. And he explained to the professor that there is no such thing that one can take anything without other people's knowing. The deities will know of the wrongdoing. There is nothing as privacy, and other people who know, the wise person who can know other people's mind will also know of the wrongdoing. So there is no privacy for the wrongdoing. So he did not bring anything else. So the professor knew that the student was honest, where other students are dishonest. So the professor handed his daughter in marriage to the honest student. So this example shows that being honest, the person will have good opportunity, good fortune. In this case, the person who was honest got the opportunity to be wedded to a beautiful wife. And also, one should know that if the person is honest, one will have a smooth life. If the person is dishonest, he or she will not have a smooth life. One should not conceal, one should not hide one's wrongdoings and mistakes, and one should not pretend to be innocent, whereas he or she has wrongdoing. If the person is pretending to be innocent, it shows the dishonesty. Especially in the meditation practice, yogis should be honest. One should note that one should not pretend to have virtue that one does not really possess. And one should not exaggerate his or her virtue. If the person has very little virtue, the person should not exaggerate it to be big. And if the person has mistake, one should not pretend to be innocent. And one having a lot of mistakes, one should not pretend to have only few mistakes. In this way, one should not pretend. One should not be pretending. One should be honest. In order to have virtue, one should refrain oneself from things that are not proper. And one should refrain oneself not to be harming others. As much one can refrain oneself from wrongdoing, the more virtuous the person will become, and the more quality and ability the person will cultivate. In order to practice, in order to become virtuous, one needs to practice based on honesty. Based on one's honesty, one should practice so that one will become uplifted. So when practicing, one should not pretend to have virtues that one does not really have. And one should not pretend to have lots of virtue, whereas he or she has very little. So it is very important to have honesty. When coming for practice, when the yogis are given guidance and instruction, according to the teaching of the Buddha, it is important for the yogi to put it into practice. Buddhaṃ Buddhato Passati, one should observe the object in the way the object really is. In noting the object, one should note it with aim and effort, and one should describe one's practice honestly. Whether yogi can note the object with sustained mindfulness. If the yogi is able to note the object with sustained mindfulness, what he or she comes to know should be reported. One should not be reporting on something that one does not actually discern. And one should not be reporting in exaggeration of the experiences. One should be accurate and precise in reporting to the teacher. So it is very important to practice respectfully, meticulously, thoroughly, and when coming for interview, yogi should report accurately, precisely what he or she is experiencing. The more honest the yogi is, the easier it is to give guidance and instruction. So it is very important to have honesty in the practice. So Sayadaw does not mean to say this and that yogi is dishonest, but what Sayadaw is trying to point out is the nature of the human. So yogi should also be careful about the nature of the human. The meditation teachers have experienced, they themselves have practiced, and when a mature meditation teacher introduces the yogi, the teacher knows whether the yogi is really working hard. The teacher knows whether the yogi is reporting correctly or not. And the teacher knows whether the yogi is reporting from his or her imagination. Some of the yogis report with exaggeration, hoping to make others think highly of him or her. When a yogi is asked whether he or she can note rising falling, whether he or she can note every rising, every falling, meticulously, thoroughly, yogi answers yes. And if the teacher asks, can you keep the mindfulness sustained on the rising falling? The yogi answers yes. And if the teacher says, what do you come to know when you note rising falling? Then the yogi cannot describe about rising falling. And some of them report from his or her imagination. If the person is reporting from his or her imagination, not from their practice, then the teacher becomes doubtful of the yogi. And if the yogi is explaining from his or her imagination, then he or she is dishonest. Yogi should describe how many sitting meditations he or she can practice and the duration of each sitting, and also walking meditation, how long yogi can walk. And yogi should describe whether he or she can note the object with aim and effort, with sustained mindfulness. And some of the yogis report very flippantly, just they take it very lightly and superficially. If the teacher asks how long he or she can keep the mind on the abdomen, yogi might say 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or even half an hour. So if the yogi is reporting that he or she can keep the mind on the rising falling for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour continuously, hoping to make the teacher think highly of him or her, it shows that the person is dishonest. The mind is very difficult to control, and even though yogi makes the effort to keep the mind on the rising falling, it doesn't stay all the time. It wanders from one time to another. If there is mindfulness for 1 minute without a gap continuously, there will be 60 moments of mindfulness. So even to keep the mind on the rising falling continuously for 1 minute for 60 moments, it is not easy. So to keep the mind continuously on the rising falling for 5 or 10 minutes, it is difficult. Some of the yogis have been reporting they can keep their mind continuously on the rising falling for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Then it is they report that they can keep the mind continuously for 10 minutes, 15 minutes without a gap, without wandering. Then the meditation teacher knows whether the yogi is reporting correctly or not. If he or she is able to note rising falling, what it is that he or she comes to know. Is it the rising? Is it the form or shape of the abdomen? Or is it the manner of rising? Or is it nature such as warmth, heat, stiffness, or tension? In this way, yogi should describe what he or she comes to know by noting rising and falling. If the yogi is reporting something that she has not experienced, it shows that the person is dishonest. It will be very difficult to correct such kind of person. So when coming for report, yogi should report precisely, accurately to the teacher. Some of the honest yogis, they're very honest in their report. They say, even though the teacher asks to note the rising falling continuously, it is difficult to keep the mind on the rising falling continuously. If the yogi reports it this way, it means that the yogi has understood the nature of the mind, knowing that the mind is difficult to be controlled. So if the yogi is honest in reporting, then the teacher can give the guidance to the yogi, and it will take no time. It will be very soon that the yogi develops knowledge stage by stage, and the teacher will be satisfied with such kind of yogi. So in order to enable the teacher to help the yogi, it is important for the yogi to help the teacher by reporting accurately, precisely. And it is important that yogis should be practicing meticulously, thoroughly, so that yogi will not be missing or failing to note the object. Practicing Vipassana meditation is to know, to understand oneself. In order to make the mind mature, one needs to practice Satipatthana meditation. So practicing Satipatthana meditation is the self-research. The example is given. There is the worldly example given that when one is doing research on antiques that are hidden, then by excavating the antiques, one has to make the record accurately, precisely what they have excavated. So when doing report, they should write accurately so that people will know what has been found, what has been discovered. And Sayadaw gives an example. When one is looking at another person, one has to look at the face. Looking at the face of the other person, one will see the forehead, the chin, the eyes, the cheeks, and one will be able to describe the features of the other person. In the same way, one should be mindful of the presently arising object in order to know the true nature. One should observe the object the moment the object arises in order to know the true nature. One will sure know the true nature by noting the object at the moment the object arises. Just as food has its own flavor and taste, in the same way, the nama rupa has their own characteristics, and by practicing with faith and confidence, one will discern the nature, the characteristics. In the sitting meditation, one observes the rising and falling of the abdomen, as well as other objects that arise, that really exist. In the walking also, one should be mindful of lifting, moving, placing. When doing walking meditation, when lifting the foot, what does the yogi come to know? Is it the form or shape of the foot? Is it the manner of lifting? Or is it the nature such as lightness, pulling, or what? And when noting, moving and placing also, what the yogi comes to know, yogi should report to the teacher. So in this way, yogi should practice thoroughly, meticulously. Yogi should not practice in an easygoing manner. So today, Sayadaw explained how yogi should be honest and how yogi should report with honesty. Sayadaw explained of the quality of being honest according to the teaching of the Buddha. And Sayadaw will continue to explain how one should cultivate the awakened saddha through the practice. And this will be all for today.